Welcome, UCL fans, to our Season 2 Week 15 review and ranking for the United Championship League. I am your host, Fanatic64, and this is the final week before playoffs. So let's see how the teams are doing, as well as take a look at the matchups that took place this week. If you do enjoy, I hope you do leave it a thumbs up, and let me know down below what team you're going to be rooting for the playoffs. Sorry, I'm just spacing out right now. It's been a long day for me. We're just going to jump into our review for the week. We're going to start off again. I haven't had time to make the graphics. I've been very behind in a lot of things and haven't had a lot of access to this computer to actually make them, so forgive me for that. We have starting off the Tucson Terrakions, who were 6-8, taking on the Bronx Beartics, who were 12-2. And it was a 2-0 victory for the Bronx Beartics. The MVP of the match goes to Garchomp from the Bronx Beartics, who managed to get all six knockouts after setting up. It was a complete, almost like I don't want to say 6-0 sweep, but he just swept all of the Tucson Terrakions after that. Up next, we have the Philadelphia Alligators, who were 6-8, going up against the Long Island Reggie Rockies, who were 11-3. And it was a 1-0 victory for the Philadelphia Alligators. MVP of the match goes to Scrafty from the Philadelphia Alligators, who managed to get 2 knockouts this week. Honorable mentions, though, also will go to the Magneton from the Long Island Reggie Rockies, who did manage to pick up 3 kills this week. Up next, we had the Manchester Magnazones, who were 6-8, taking on the Tulsa Talonflames, who were 1-13. And it was a 2-0 victory for the Manchester Magnazones. MVP of the match goes to Ferrothorn from the Manchester Magnazones, who did manage to get. Actually, they got four knockouts. One of which was due to stealth rock damage, at least in the end for it. Moving on, we had the South Beach Slow Kings, who are. What were they? 2-12, I believe. I gotta go back into my notes because I wrote it down wrong. Let's see. South Beach Slow Kings took on the Durham Druddigons, who were 12-2. South Beach was 2-12. Yeah, so they were just completely reversed on that, and it was a 6-0 victory for the Durham Druddigons. The MVP of the match goes to. It's a tie between Shaman and Blastoise. They both had 2 knockouts during the matchup. I can't remember which one got the last one for. I believe I believe Blastoise actually got the last 2 knockouts. So I guess we'll give it to Blastoise then for it. So gaining momentum for the Durham Druddigons going into the playoffs. Up next, we have the Grand Canyon Greninjas, who are 4-8-1, taking on the Bristol City Blazekins, who are 7-7. And it was a 2-0 victory for the Bristol City Blazekins. MVP of the match goes to Talonflame, who, very similar to Garchomp from the Bronx Beartics, I had to think for a minute, managed to get all 6 knockouts this week. Now, it wasn't after a setup, it was just after a lot of different switching and setting up properly for it. So good. So they end up finishing up positive with an 8-7, which is what they were going for as well. Up next, we have the Toronto Togekiss taking on the Newcastle Nidokings. However, this match did not take place, and there was no explanation, so I actually went onto social media and asked both of them what happened with the match, and it turns out that the Newcastle Nidokings forfeited this matchup, so giving the win to the Toronto Togekiss this week. Up next, we have our 2 kind of hype matches that we had going into this. As I said, we had the Carolina Kildeos and the Real Morel, and the Pittsburgh Pichus and the St. Louis Rampardos, both of which are basically determining who was going to make it into that final playoff spot. We already knew the Real Morel, Durham Druddigons, Bronx Beartics, guaranteed playoffs no matter what. Didn't matter win, lose, or draw for them, they would have made it in. However, this was more for the Pittsburgh Pichus and the Carolina Kildeos. Both teams needing a win to secure their spot in the playoffs. If one team lost, then the other would definitely make it in for it, or rather, assuming the other team won their matchup for it. So we'll start off with the Carolina Kildeos taking on the Real Morel. It was Carolina Kildeos, who are 10-4. basically they would have to win to make playoffs, or if they lost, they would have to hope that Pittsburgh Peaches would lose their match. Unfortunately, the Carolina Killdeers did lose their matchup in a 4-0 fashion. MVP of the match went to the Medicham from the Real Maril, who managed to get the last 3 knockouts of the game. So it came down to the Pittsburgh Peaches versus the St. Louis Rampardos in Pittsburgh in a must-win situation in order to make playoffs. If they lose this match, then they are out of playoffs, and the Carolina Killdeers move into the playoff position. And originally going into the match as well, the St. Louis Rampardos coach A-Drive was saying that he was just going to make up a fun team for the week before he realized how big of an impact this matchup was for playoff contention. So he actually played this one, as he would play any other matchup, and very admirable for him doing that, making it a task for Pittsburgh to actually try and win. And in the end, it became a 5-0 victory for the St. Louis Rampardos, guaranteeing Carolina Killdeers make it into the playoffs. MVP of the match went to Venusaur, who managed to get 3 knockouts this week. So, with that all out of the way, I'm not going to, we'll go ahead and show up. Again, I keep doing this so late in the day, and I'm so tired. I forget to set up everything I needed to. So, mind the live editing from this, but we're going to go ahead and take a look at week 15. Here we go. I like that over there. So, the final rankings for this week, for this season, as put down by at least, if we are to incorporate differentials at least. Of course, the final rankings would be a little bit different, as in the UCL, the Durham Druddigons are going into the playoffs as the number 1 seed because they did defeat both the Real Morel and the Bronx Bearticks this season. Carolina Killdeers definitely, I have it backwards on there, but they are in 4th place. They would have been 5th place if you went by a differential. However, that was not the case due to how this goes down for it. So, 16th place, Tulsa Town Flames, 1-4, 1-14 for the season. So, definitely kind of lowered compared to what they did in season 1. South Beach Slow Kings 2-12. I think that's almost about the same record. Figure that out later on. 14th place, we have the Long Island Reggie Rockies 3-12. 13th place, Grand Canyon Greninjas 4-10-1 to finish off the season. 12th place, we have the Newcastle Nido Kings 5-9-1 for it. 11th place, we have the Toronto Tokakiss at 6-9. 10th place goes to Philadelphia for Alligators with 7-8. 9th place went to the Manchester Magnazones, the most improved team of the season, in my opinion, for it. I don't think it's even an opinion, it's almost a fact. You go from a 0-15 record to a 7-8 record. Definitely very nice for them. 8th place, we had the Tucson Terrakions, who were 8-7. 7th place is the Bristol City Blazekins, also at 8-7. 6th place, the Pittsburgh Peaches, unfortunately just barely making it, just barely getting knocked out of playoff contention. 5th place we're going to, normally would have been the Carolina Killdeers, but because of how it worked out, St. Louis Rampardos, 5th place for this. Just, again, had they won last week, then it wouldn't have mattered what happened this week because, they would have had to have won to still got into playoffs, but if they would have won last week, they could have lost this week. It wouldn't have mattered. They would have made playoffs if Carolina had lost. But, that was that. But 4th place, Carolina Killdeers making it into the playoffs for the first time. Bronx Bearticks, all 3 of the teams, Bronx Bearticks, Durham Druddigons, Real Morel, all ended 13-2. Durham Druddigons making their first appearance in the playoffs after having to forfeit the last half of Season 1, being unable to actually make playoffs. Had a real good chance, but just could not do it. Bronx Bearticks, the returning champs as well, trying to go for that 3rd UCL title in a row, if you include Season 1 and the Little Cup off-season tournament. And the Real Morel also making their appearance in the playoffs. Of course, they did make playoffs during the Little Cup tournament, but did not make it into the finals. They made it into the semifinals at least. So we're going to, of course, have a shorter preview video because There's only 2 matchups that are taking place this Saturday for it. And then once the season is all said and done, what's going to end up happening is I'm going to actually probably, since it's going to be a long time before the UCL comes back, and of course when it does come back, it's going to be playing on Sun and Moon instead of on Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, so there'll be a lot more different teams that are going to be available. But between now and when either their next off season comes up, or if they do season 3, whenever that may take place, I'm going to be doing at least one video a week for the next several weeks. Starting off after the finals, and after we do the finals, I'll do like my standard top 20 Pokemon from the actual UCL, breaking it down from, who had the most knockouts versus been knocked out the most, going all the way, just doing my best top 20 from that. Or at least 20 if I can figure out a good 20 times. It was a little bit more difficult. They're a lot more spread out than they were last season. And then after that, I'm actually going to do my own personal team reviews, seeing how they drafted, at least even season 1 to season 2 for a lot of the teams. Of course, the Real Maril are the only teams who were not here during the season 1, but we'll at least be just going over one at a time. So just one a week during that time of just looking at the different teams and how they played during the season, what was positive, what was negative about the teams, and of course those will all be just my opinions on it. They will have, I'm sure each of these teams will have their own kind of review of how they played during the season for it. But that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for this. I will of course be back on Friday. I'll probably be a little bit later, similar to this one was for it. Talking about the actual playoff matches, and hopefully I'll have enough time where I can actually set up the layouts better with the actual the matchups that I usually have had done for most of this season for it. But thank you all very much for watching. You have yourselves a good time. Take care and goodbye.